Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be talking some more Armada, and we're doing another Ships of the Fleet breakdown. This one is going to be for the Republic, or the GAR, or Grand Army of the Republic. We're going to be breaking down the ships available to the Republic and talking about kind of what roles they fill. I know that there are a lot of new Armada players that have kind of gotten into the game, and this is a good time to kind of continue breaking down the ships available, since we're kind of entering a period where there aren't going to be any new ships for a while. So it's a good idea to sort of learn the ships that are available now and become very comfortable with them. And the more we learn about the ships that we have available now and what roles they fill, the more it sort of shines a light on some of the empty roles in some of the factions and new things that potentially could be added in the future. If you guys are new here to the channel, make sure you enter to win that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. I have also done a similar Ships of the Fleet breakdown for the Separatists, as well as lots of other Armada content like what to buy first, battle reports, news breakdowns, what does the future hold, all of these types of videos. I'm going to put some links to those over here towards the end of the video, so be sure to check those out. But if you're just curious, also there's links. You can join our Discord. We have a very family-friendly Discord. The links are going to be down in the video description. So if you're on a phone, there's going to be like a little down arrow over here. If you're on PC, there's going to be a see more button down there. We got links to Discord, other social media links, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that other stuff, or Crabbok.com. If you are an experienced Armada player, maybe you're not able to get out as much right now, you're looking to maybe try some solo play at home, we have a free AI expansion for Armada up on Crabbok.com, as well as some other content over there, some kind of cool groovy scenario play as well. So yeah, you can check out lots of free content over on Crabbok.com, but hop in the Discord. I'd love to have you become part of our community. And plus, if you want to ask some questions, you can certainly do so in the chat here, but you can also join our Discord to kind of talk about lists and ask advice from people. And there's other content for other games as well. There, we also have Legion, X-Wing. We've been getting into other games as well. So a lot of stuff down there, but you can learn more at your leisure. But for now, let's go ahead and start talking about the different ships of the fleet. So for the Galactic Republic, Clone Wars is kind of newer to Star Wars Armada, because Armada started out with the Empire and the Rebellion, and then they added, back in April of 2019, they announced that the Clone Wars was going to be coming, and then early 2020, we started getting Clone Wars content with the new starters. So if you have already bought into the Republic, you probably already have two of these ships, the Consular class armed cruiser and the Consular class Charger C-70. So these are, the cheapest entry point into getting your fleets on the board for Republic. They're the cheapest ships at 37 points. The armed cruiser is kind of a good filler ship. The Charger C-70 is also fairly cheap at 45 points, but it gives it a little bit more range and potentially a little more survivability. But so this is one of those ships that I'm not particularly crazy about right now, but the best thing it has going for it is its relatively low cost. There initially was a little bit more of a draw to a ship like this, primarily because of a title available to it for the Radiant 7 title. So this was a ship that first showed up at the very beginning of the Phantom Menace, as Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are flying to do their trade negotiations, and this ship is promptly destroyed inside the docking bay of a Lucrehulk that the Trade Federation has. And so, and that's of course the red ship over here, the red version in the Senate colors. They since up-armed these a little bit more, and then of course the Charger C-70 was featured a little bit more throughout the Clone Wars. Hence the enhanced weaponry on the Charger C-70. So between the two of these, your Consular armed cruiser is a little bit better at taking down squadrons with its two anti-squadron dice, but not as good at attacking ships, at least at long range, because it does not have any red dice. Both ships feature only 4 hull points. They're very low on stats, only 1 command, 1 squadron, 2 engineering. evade and contain, and of course redirect. But one of the things they do have going for them is they're very fast. These ships can move at speed 4, and they have a lot of different clicks for maneuverability available throughout their maneuver chart. As far as upgrades, they're fairly light, but usually you don't want to put too many upgrades on a small ship to begin with. Now, if you are running the Radiant 7, it's also going to give you the fleet support icon, and this initially was the only way to get fleet support in the Republic. So Consular class armed cruisers were often taken as a very cheap option to bring fleet support into your fleet, and it still does exist as a cheap option for that. If you're running a lot of bombers, a Consular class armed cruiser running the Radiant 7 title can be a great way to put something like Bomber Command Center in your fleet. So that is certainly an option. Now, alternatively, the Consular class Charger C70 sort of fills kind of a role of, hey, I want a lot of cheap attack ships. And of course, it's significantly more expensive than the armed cruiser, but you can still run quite a few of these without it completely filling up your list. So if you want to run 2 or 3 or even 4 of the Charger C70s, you can do that. But one of the problems, and I talked a little bit earlier about some of the holes or the emptinesses that this can sort of reveal within a faction, is that the Republic doesn't really have any commanders or a whole lot of additional support to make a build running multiple Charger C70s really good right now. A lot of the other factions have, some more offensive dice, like, hey, extra dice when you attack and things like that, as like some of the things that they can do. The Republic doesn't have any commanders that want to give extra dice to attacking ships. So until they do, the C70 is just going to be kind of okay at best, in my opinion, just because it's really good for a fleet like that. I know that there's a lot of other factions that a ship like this could potentially work a little better in, but since the Republic doesn't have somebody to fill that role, this one kind of works better as sort of maybe an objective hunting ship, or somebody who wants to get around and flank and just throw a little bit of damage here and there. It's not going to be particularly great at dealing with enemy squadrons, but it will be fast enough to escape them. It has a little bit in the way of upgrades where you might be able to give it some kind of turbo laser upgrade, or maybe give it an engine text and give it some extra maneuverability. And so that's kind of the role that this one wants to perform. It wants to get to a certain place very quickly. It can be a nice candidate for Mercy Mission if you're running that new card, but it wants to get somewhere. Hopefully it wants to outmaneuver or get out of range of enemy ship fire, or kind of dance on the edge of long range, maybe being able to throw some red dice back at an opponent while relying on its 1 evade to keep it alive. But ultimately, these aren't the best ships available for the Republic, but the price is fairly good for the 2 of them, especially for the armed cruiser. If you can keep it alive long enough to get into close range. Generally, though, with the armed cruiser and its blue and black dice, while that can be a little bit more damaging to large ships, generally you don't want it to end up getting that close to enemy ships, because it can go splat very, very, very quickly. So again, these are kind of like your really cheap, and you're kind of like your pawns as far as ships are concerned. These are the ones that are cheapest and also first to die. Well, unless of course you play them very defensively. Moving on to the other ship that we get in the Republic starter, which is going to be the Acclamator. Now, we only get 1 Acclamator versus 2 of the Consulars. So if you did pick up a Republic starter, you're just going to have 1 of these. And of course, with all ships, you do get 2 versions of them. We have the Acclamator 1 and the Acclamator 2. The big difference between these 2 is that they have slightly different dice pools available. The Acclamator 2 has got an extra die in its front arc, and that's kind of a big deal, because you don't often see ships that have an increased number of dice in their anti-ship weaponry. It's more common to have a different anti-squadron armament, or just the dice change colors, but not to actually have more. There's only a handful of ships that actually give a whole extra die, and that's what the Acclamator 2 does. But this is a good sort of jack of all trades kind of ship for the Republic. I think it's it's actually a ship I very much like. It's certainly iconic. It's certainly seen in the movies. It first shows up in Episode 2 to kind of drop off all of the clones. You see an awful lot of these on screen in Episode 2, although they're usually used as drop ships in landing craft to kind of set down lots of clones and lots of heavy equipment. But they also are certainly built up to be defensible while in orbit of planets or while in deep space. So, basically, kind of jacks of all trades. This does feature the salvo defense token plus a brace and a redirect. So pretty good defense tokens all around. Salvo is, of course, the new defense token that lets you counterattack and using your printed rear battery armament, and they have a 2 dice rear battery. The Acclamator 2 is a little bit better for salvo because of the longer range granted by the blue as opposed to the black die in the back there. As far as upgrades, the Acclamator 1 sort of serves as a true carrier a little bit better, in that it's got the double offensive retrofit, and that is especially nice to have. It doesn't have a defensive retrofit, so this is like a ship that, while it can survive, a big shot, it doesn't necessarily want to put itself directly in the line of fire. So it kind of wants to be in that on the outskirts, or maybe in the middle of the, or kind of dancing kind of between the outskirts and the center of the battle, close enough to activate ships and to be able to support those ships, but not so close to enemy fire that it's taking a lot of overlapping coverages and overlapping arcs of continuous fire, because it won't stand up to fire that long. But it's got enough hull and defense tokens to allow it to survive at least a few shots, and so that's an important thing for a carrier. I definitely feel more comfortable having a medium base ship like this with 7 hull as a carrier that has a brace and a redirect, 4 shields in the front too, and so it's got a very, very strong frontal arc. So this is a ship that also kind of wants to be pointed at the action for the most part, but it's got a decent side arc. So if you're able to double arc somebody front and side, you can actually bring a lot of damage to them. In addition to your squadrons that you're activating, you can actually get a pretty good shot on this one. This one kind of closely, in some ways, it reminds us of the Victory Star Destroyer for the Empire, and that it's a medium ship. It's got this strong front arc. It's not the most maneuverable ship, but it still can be fairly tanky and wants to go right at you. And that's kind of what the Acclamator does. The Acclamator can go to speed 3, though, and that's one of the big things, because it's really nice to be able to go to speed 3 when you want to. Especially on maybe like turn 1 or turn 2, kind of get yourself in position quickly enough that you can still support all those fighters, but then begin to slow down and maybe gain a little bit of maneuverability as you do so. You're not gaining much, though, because in any of its 3 speeds, it only gets the 1 yaw, so you'd have to rely on other methods, like maybe doing a nav dial to slow down a little bit, gain an extra yaw, and kind of put yourself in position to continue to support the fleet. But they both have a ordnance upgrade and a turbo laser upgrade to allow them some offensive capability if you want to build them that way. Now, for building it offensively, I kind of prefer the Acclamator 2. Still got the squadron value of 3, still got an engineering value of 4, which is nice, but we have an extra die on the front for only 5 more points. So I love getting a blue die at that, for 5 points. Like, the price is right as far as I'm concerned. So I generally prefer the Acclamator 2. It's also got the defensive retrofit, so this can make for a pretty nice flagship. Also, one of my favorite things to do with these is to put swivel mount batteries on this particular ship, because I take that black die from the sides, I point it out the front, and now I have black dice in the front. If I do concentrate fire, it can actually be a very effective gunship. And so that's one of the things I like about the Acclamator 2, is that it kind of brings a really good balance between survivability, tankiness with the defensive retrofit, which gives it that extra level of security, and squadron support, and it can kind of do a little bit of everything. So again, I talked earlier, I said it was kind of a jack of all trades. I think the Acclamator 2 best represents that. If you want to get 2 of these, you're probably going to need to buy a second starter, because that's the only place currently to get these is in the starter. So this and the C70 or the Consular, only available in the starter. Now, moving on to our next wave, and what we call Wave 10 for Star Wars Armada, is the next 2 types of ships for the Republic. Starting off with the Pelta. Now, the Pelta comes in two varieties, the Pelta class medical frigate and the Pelta class transport frigate at 49 and 45 points respectively. Now, these two ships have some different purposes, but generally they're sort of in a middle ground where they're small-based ships, kind of like the Consular, but they're not fast. They're slow and small. So, like, that initially sounds kind of bad, but when you think about small ships, because they're priced about the same, 45 and 49 points. That's they're both under 50 points, and that's kind of where you like to see small ships. They can do a lot of different things, and I think this is a type of ship that can be a flagship if you are looking for to have a lot of ships out there. So when the day comes that maybe you do decide you want to run a whole bunch of Charger C-70s. Maybe you throw one of these Peltas in here as a flagship. Hey, it's got 5 hull, it's got a brace token, and it's got a defensive retrofit. It's actually pretty survivable as far as how small ships go. So this could make a really good flagship if you're doing what they call the MSU fleet, the multiple small unit fleet. And there currently isn't really a commander that really cries out to be able to do that right now. But then again, maybe you experiment, maybe you try it anyway, even without a commander that directly supports that. There's other commanders that sort of indirectly can support a fleet that's doing that, but generally that's not the way I would like to run a Pelta. I actually like to run a Pelta in a fleet that's using Wolf Yularen. And in that case, I like to run the medical frigate, even though it's not doesn't have the defensive retrofit. It does feature, like both of them do, the fleet support option, and this is one of the things that makes the Pelta stand out. It's now a pretty good fleet support ship that's also going to be a lot more survivable than a Consular equipped with the Radiant 7, even though you could do it a little bit cheaper on a Consular. This is a ship that can afford to kind of stay close to enemy squadrons. Maybe you want to run Bomber Command Center. It can do that a lot cheaper. Maybe you want to run something else on here to hand out other tokens to the rest of your fleet. It's also a way for it to stay kind of close, right in the middle of everybody else, not have to worry about a lucky long-range shot, one-shotting it. It really doesn't have to worry about that, which has got the extra hull, plus it's got the brace token. Depending on which one you go with, the medical frigate has got a little bit better offensive capability. It does have the offensive retrofit. It's also the better carrier because it's got a squadron value of 2, which is respectable, especially combined with a Yularen fleet. You can you can potentially get up to 4 I think 4 squadrons out of this if you do a token and the dial. So you can get a lot of squadron activations out of the Pelta, but really it's there as a supplemental ship that can do multiple different things. And one of the reasons that I really like it in a Wolf Yularen fleet is the high engineering value. And I think that's one of the things that makes this so interesting is that it's a small ship with an engineering value of 4, and it has a lot of tools that let it take advantage of that engineering in addition to everything else. So it's a little bit of a weird ship because it fits a very interesting niche in that it's great to support your other ships, whether you're doing something like projection experts and handing shields over to other people. Engineering value of 4 is spectacular for things like projection experts. So that much is really cool. You can send some shields over. You can recover shields easily if you need to do that. But it also works well with Yularen because you can spend engineering commands to repair squadrons. And so in this case, I like the Pelta medical frigate because, hey, I can activate 2 squadrons. I can also repair 2 squadrons because of the repairs cost 2 each if you're using Yularen's squad healing ability. And so it's a pretty versatile ship. It doesn't really do anything like exceedingly well, other than being a capable support carrier at a low price, and that's kind of what it does. In my opinion, it's also maybe not one of my favorite Republic ships. It's good in just very specific fleets for me, but it still serves a lot of different purposes. I think it'll get better as we get more commanders and more new tech in the future someday that open up new doors for the Republic. But it's not bad. It's not bad. It's definitely survivable, and that's an important thing for any ship, especially in the Republic that is so they seem so squadron oriented and those Jedi oriented that you don't want your ships to die and then be left with only squadrons and still end up tabled. So I think it's good to kind of keep it alive, do some support, and hopefully either repair your squadrons or help heal your other ships, or even heal itself. That's kind of what it wants to be. It's kind of like the little engine that could. Maybe it's like a Volkswagen driving uphill slowly, but it sure does make it. And that brings us to the godfather of the Republic, the Venator. The Venator has everything going for it. It's just a fantastic ship. It's definitely the most iconic out of all of the Clone Wars. It's also the most recognizable for the Republic. And it does the most. It's the everything ship. So the Venator 1 and Venator 2 class Star Destroyers come in at 90 and 100 points respectively. They each have 9 hull, 4 defense tokens. They've got Brace, Redirect, Contain, and Salvo. With 3 dice, 1 of each color in their rear printed arc, their salvo can be potentially nasty. This wave did come also with a lot of different upgrades to really improve salvo and make it much more deadly. And the Venator does have a lot of the upgrade slots to just make salvo just a force to be reckoned with. So it can definitely be run with lots of upgrades to its salvo capability. It's a speed 3 ship, doesn't have much maneuverability at speed 3, but once it slows down to speed 2, it gains a very respectable level of mobility and turning ability with that 2 yaw basically at speed 2. So that much is nice. As far as arcs, it's pretty well suited all around. It's got 6 dice in the front. It is a Star Destroyer after all. Its front arc is its strongest arc, but it has actually pretty good damage from the side and from the rear. So even if it doesn't have you in its front arc at all, if it's able to perhaps double arc you from the side and rear, it can still put a really nasty hurting on someone. The Venator 1 with 3 command, 3 squadron, and 4 engineering is a very well-rounded ship. It has the fleet command upgrade in there, so this is a way to get your fleet commands all the time. The only other way we had before this was to stick a flag bridge on an Acclamator, and that's only a one-shot use. So yeah, it's very nice to have fleet command available on a 90-point ship. We have everything but ion cannons, right? Nothing in the Republic fleet currently has the ion cannon capability. I'm sure that will happen someday. I think if they ever do Venators not Venators, but Victory Star Destroyers for the Republic, I think that would be the natural inclusion point for the ion cannon to finally show up. And that would give it some kind of way for it to really stand out against other ships in the fleet, plus an opportunity to introduce more ion cannons someday. But yes, it does have ordnance and turbo laser upgrades, which of course, with all the dice it has, it's a great opportunity to put some weapons on here. You also have the Venator 2, which is going to change its dice a little bit. Instead of 3 red and 3 black in the front, it's actually going to have 2 red, 2 blue, and 2 black, making it slightly deadlier at medium range, slightly weaker at long range, but a lot more likely to get those accuracies in. We've got also a much better long range, or long to medium range side arc as well. So the Venator 2 is going to have a little bit more consistent damage, but also it gains the defensive retrofit. And so the Venator 2 makes for a very, very good flagship. It's got the extra hull, it's got the defense tokens, and now it has the defensive retrofit to help keep your commander alive. But one of the biggest things that really, really stands out for the Venator 2 over the Venator 1 is the squadron value of 5. 5 is a very, very high number. Normally, your best carriers have either 3 or 4. This ship has a squadron value of 5. So if you're running a Venator 2 and you're not running squadrons, you might be doing something disastrously wrong. This makes for one of the best carriers in the game. And it's especially good in a faction that really has a really good strength in its squadrons. So now you have a ship that has a lot of upgrades that do synergize directly with squadrons, between the officers that the Republic has, between the weapons teams, between the offensive retrofit. You have fantastic squadron support. You can also keep, this is one that you can potentially throw all the upgrades on, or just half of them. It's just such a cool ship. And another thing is, at this point value, you can run 3 Venators realistically in a build. If we compare this to something like the Imperial Star Destroyer, you can't really run 3 Imperial Star Destroyers in a build and have it be, I would say, competitive, because you leave yourself no room for upgrades, for meaningful upgrades. So you kind of have to run them bare bones or like naked, and so being able, but with Venators are so much cheaper that you can actually run them with some good upgrades and have some points left over for things like squadrons or meaningful upgrades. So yeah, I have 3 Venators personally, and like the main difference between these two for me is that I typically like to run the Venator 1s with the SFAT upgrade, which gives it that good ignition arc, and then maybe we have them kind of shooting out sideways with the ignition arc out the side, and they can get some really nice dice even at long range. If you can kind of have all 3 of them kind of flying together, each with that upgrade, it's very, very cool. It can be a fun thing to do. You don't have to run it with the Venator 1. It works, honestly, with either option. The Venator 2, if you run the SFAT on Venator 2, you still are actually able to activate some squadrons because it's got such a large hangar bay. You can stick a giant artillery in there, shooting its artillery laser, and still have room left for a couple of squadrons. So you can definitely do that. But I like the Venator 1s as more of the dedicated gun platform, and the Venator 2 as the flagship and carrier. That's kind of how I tend to run them. But still, it's a good ship. There's a lot of different ways to run either of them. And just because the Venator 2 makes for a better flagship with a defensive retrofit, doesn't mean you can't run a Venator 1. Sometimes you need those extra 10 points, and 10 points can make a big difference sometimes to make a whole list come together and work. So out of all of these, I mean, if you have your core set and you've got one of each of the other ships, I think you got a lot of options. But out of all of these, I think the Venator is probably the first one you might want to get a second one of, and maybe someday a third. I don't think running 3 Venators is an all the time thing. So I think if you get a second Venator, that's going to give you a lot of different build options. You could even run 2 Venator 1s with the SFATs, and then maybe jump back to like a Pelta for support, and then even have maybe a Consular in there somewhere too. There's plenty of options. There definitely is room for more options, but this one makes a very good kind of workhorse for this faction with all the different upgrades that are available to it. It can do so much, and it does so many of these things exceedingly well that it's a very pleasant inclusion, and definitely makes this faction strong despite having so few ships. All right, guys. Well, that is going to wrap it up for the ships of the Republic. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I wish we had more ships currently to talk about, but when more content starts getting worked on and gets announced, of course, this is the right place to be, because I'll be the first to bring you the news. And of course, we'll be looking for more ships like the Architans, for example, which is featured prominently right here. Maybe the Victory someday too. Who knows what else will show up? And plus more squadron packs, more titles, more upgrades, all kinds of great, more Clone Wars and Galactic Civil War, Star Wars Armada content. Hopefully we'll get it within the next couple of years. But until then, there's plenty of ships and new combinations and build options for us to discover and talk about. And I'll be bringing you more Armada coverage in the future. So if you guys are interested in Armada, you're in the right place. If not, well, I've got a lot of other games that I talk about as well. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing and help make this channel possible. So thank you for your continued support. Make sure when going into deep space, always bring a spacesuit. You never know when you might have to kind of go outside of the ship and do some repairs, and you'd hate to have to do that without a suit.